And I think that that's everyone. Now, next, chat. I would like to at least try and start this video. I wanted to watch it a couple days ago, but then we didn't have time. And now we have a lot of time. I actually managed to... I'm pretty impressed with myself. We managed to cover all of the news today. So now we get to try this one. It's this video from Tom Nicholas titled Baby Bust, Why Conservatives Are Obsessed with Birth Rates Now. So let's go.
Let me show you a video.
The goal of our organization is not to convince people who have no kids to have 2 kids or 1 kid. It's to convince people who have 4 kids and to make it easier for people who have 4 kids to have 9 kids if they want.
This is Malcolm Collins. Malcolm and his wife Simone are authors, private equity investors, and venture capitalists based in Pennsylvania. Earlier this year, they welcomed their amazingly named 4th child, Industry Americas, into the world. But if a family of 6 sounds like a pretty full house already, they don't plan to stop there.
We're gonna have more than 7 if we can, basically, until my uterus is forcibly removed in a botched surgery. I'm gonna keep going.
If you keep even vaguely up to date on the news, you've likely seen the Collinses about before. They've been interviewed a lot.
These people are so weird.
Over the past few years, in newspapers, on podcasts, on TV. And that's because the Collinses aren't just planning to have lots of kids simply because they're fond of children. No, they're the leading lights of a niche yet vociferous movement which they call pronatalism.
So the Pronatalist Foundation, which we run, says no matter what, we are going to have demographic collapse in the developed world, and it will wreak havoc on the economy. Our goal as an organization is to preserve as much of our existing human diversity as possible into the future.
Their core belief is that the greatest threat currently facing humanity is not climate change, inequality, zoonotic disease, or any of the usual concerns you might hear raised about our crisis-stricken world, but instead, declining birth rates.
It's so much work.
It's so funny too, because like, I feel like not even a decade ago, it was these same people that wouldn't stop complaining about overpopulation. And it's like, Interesting. Interesting how things change.
Worse than people think. So if you look at the United States, if you project forwards the decline in fertility rate we have had in the past 10 years, and you assume 1 generation every 30 years, for every 100 Americans, there's only going to be around 4.3 great-grandchildren.
The Collinses aren't alone in harboring this fear that humanity might be on the brink of dying out. Pronatalism has become a highly fashionable thought trend in Silicon Valley. Elon Musk has repeatedly stated that what he calls population collapse represents an existential threat to humanity, a position which appears to have factored into his own decision to have fathered 12 children at time of recording. From there, the belief that we urgently need to boost birth rates has become a recurring theme both in the contrarian podcast sphere and in formal conservative politics at the very highest levels.
We don't have enough families and children to continue as a nation.
There is one critical outcome that liberal individualism has completely failed to deliver, and that is babies.
We want to produce babies in this country, right? We want to produce babies.
When I first started making this video, I was pretty skeptical of this whole population collapse thesis. Given the rogues gallery of populists and reactionaries that have become the leading lights of the pronatalism movement, it's easy to push it aside as just another conspiracy theory. The latest installment in the franchise which brought us vaccine passports, 15-minute cities, and they're eating the dogs.
They're eating the dogs.
The more time I've spent digging around this topic, however, the clearer it seems that declining birth rates really are about to lead to some pretty significant social and economic challenges for many countries. Probably the country that you're watching this from right now. There are a few questions that I want to try and answer over the next however many minutes then. Firstly, how bad really is the decline in birth rates which the pronatalists are so incensed by? Secondly, why are they so interested in this crisis over the many other challenges the world is presently facing? And thirdly, does the pronatalism movement actually have any...
I'm so excited for him to reveal that the baby carrier has no babies in it.
useful answers to the world's
That
baby
there's no baby in the stroller.
drought, or are the real solutions ones which the Collinses, Musk, Trump and their allies would be unlikely to find so appealing?
I was thinking the same thing the whole time, yeah.
Any discussion of modern day concerns about birth rates has to start with this book. This is The Population Bomb by Paul Ehrlich. Published in 1968, Ehrlich's book makes exactly the opposite argument to that of today's pronatalists. Rather than population collapse, it warns of a rapidly
Literally, what did I just say?
approaching future in which an exponential rise in the number of babies being born means there are more human beings alive on planet Earth than planet Earth can adequately sustain.
The main premise is that there's 3.6 billion people in the world today, and we're adding about 70 million a year, and that's too many. It's too many because we are getting desperately short of food, that we're very much short of other resources, and that above all, the very delicate life support systems of the planet, the things that supply us with all of our food, ultimately with all of our oxygen, with all of our waste disposal, are now severely threatened.
What the population bomb does share with today's pronatalists is an unapologetic alarmism. At its heart is the observation that what Ehrlich calls the doubling time of the human population has been exponentially decreasing throughout history. Prior to 1650, he estimates the global population doubled around once every 1,000 years. Then, in the 200 years between 1650 and 1850, it doubled again. Then again in the 80 years following that. By the time the population bomb was published, that doubling time had dropped to just 35 years. The challenges which might come with such a rapid rise in population are fairly obvious. It might be relatively easy to double the global population in 35 years, but it's much harder to increase the size of the global food industry at the rate required to feed all those extra people. Can you build enough houses for them? Enough transport? Educate them all? Can the environment take the extra stress they'll place on the planet? Ehrlich's answer is an emphatic no. He went on to argue strongly for governments to introduce measures to discourage people from having as many children.
The only hope that there is that we will be able, at least in the United States, through the political process, to get a government that's courageous enough to say, look, we're overpopulated and we have to have population control, and start moving in that direction.
This concern that the size of the global population might one day overwhelm the resources available to feed everyone wasn't entirely new. The population bomb is effectively a modernising adaptation of an 1803 pamphlet by Thomas Malthus, which similarly predicted that overpopulation would one day lead to famine and war. Nevertheless, Ehrlich's book was a sensation. It sold more than 2 million copies, led to its author becoming a regular guest on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, and firmly lodged this concern about population growth in the popular imagination. Until very, very recently, if someone was going to strike up a conversation with you about the global population, they were almost certainly going to argue that there was simply too many of us. Ehrlich's wish for population control even came true in at least one case in the form of China's infamous one-child policy, which punished families who had more than one baby. There was just one problem with Ehrlich's thesis. Even by the time the population bomb was published, global birth rates had actually started.
Also, there was only one problem with the one child policy in China, which is that parents tried to have their children pretty consistently on the year of the dragon. So you just had like years where there were lots of children and years where there were barely any children. What, seriously? Yeah. Wait, did you guys not know about this? Hold up, let me find it. One child policy. Here is 1991 stricter enforcement of the one-child policy starts obviously 1991 here, and then Here are the 2 years of the dragon in 2000 and 2012. And as you can see, people tried to have a lot of children in the year of the dragon. Oh, God, dude. Oh, man. Yeah. They also had problems where parents would kill newborn daughters so they could have a son. Well, I don't know about, I feel weird about the usage of the word there, kill. Considering that, we don't use that word when we're describing abortion. But yeah, that, and also from my understanding, that hasn't been substantiated. But I'd be happy to look into it if anyone has more resources on it. This, however, I think is very funny. I like that the graph also kind of looks like a dragon. Yeah. Yeah. And for anyone who's like, I don't understand, like, what is this? What am I looking at? In the Chinese zodiacs, each year it belongs to a specific animal that is very similar to like how we describe horoscopes being like month to month basis. And the system is based on, at the very least, what we would consider a story about a race between all of these animals. Here we go. Here's the Wikipedia page on it. According to the legend, the Jade Emperor held a contest to decide which animals would be lucky enough to be included in the calendar. The winner of the race, the rat, received the first year of the 12-year cycle. That's me. I'm the rat. However, according to historical records and research, the Chinese zodiac appeared after the establishment of the Ganji chronicle law, and each of the 12 animals corresponded to one of the 12 branches. But anyways, the story goes that, like, the dragon obviously could have easily fucking won. But he stopped to, like, because the dragon was so noble and kind, besides being base as fuck, strong and fast, he stopped in the middle of the race to help, I think, one of the other animals. I'm trying to find the story. No, not this one. No. No. Rats be winning. Oh, wait. Why are these all just like PDF files? I just want to find the like TLDR version. Please and thank you. Okay. This is a good one. Here, this is a good explanation. The rat won because he jumped into the ox's ear. And then at the very end, he dashed out. That's why. So, like, the rat is supposed to be, you know, smart and, what's the word? Not cunning. No, not ruthless, but just, like, resourceful. There we go. That's the word. Which, as rats are, very resourceful. And then, obviously, tiger and rabbit come in next because they're fast and competitive, but the tiger is faster. What the hell? I like this one, the translation on this. Good-looking dragon and crafty snake. Oh, God. Wait, where is it? No, this isn't an accurate retelling of this. Clever, crafty. Yeah, those are the other ones. What the hell? Okay, well, it looks like there's different stories, but anyways, glaze. Anyways. Moving on.
To decline. And over the next 50 years, they would steadily reach a point where the world's
That stuff.
population was not about to catastrophically explode, but in many countries was actually starting to decline. In short then, the basic phenomenon that the Collinses, Elon Musk, JD Vance and their fellow pronatalists are so concerned by is a very real one. Across much of the world, people are having fewer children than ever before. There are a few key metrics which help us understand how population size changes over time. The first is the total fertility rate. This is the total number of children the average woman in a given country or region will have over the course of her life. At present, for example, the total fertility rate in Egypt is 2.8. Which means that, as things stand, the average Egyptian woman either has or is on her way to having 2.8 kids. But if we're interested in whether the population of Egypt or any other country is going to rise or fall over time, then we need to compare that figure to another metric called replacement level fertility. This refers to the number of babies that each woman in a given country or region would need to have for the size of that population to remain stable once that woman, and everyone else in her generation, passes away. In most countries today, that figure is around 2.1. The complete two children here effectively serve to replace the two parents who produced them when those parents die. Whilst the 0.1 of a child accounts for the fact that, sadly, not all children will survive into adulthood to produce more children of their own. Broadly speaking, if a population has a total fertility rate of more than 2.1, it will grow. Each cohort of parents will produce more children to add to the total population tally than they will reduce it by when they die. If that population's total fertility rate drops below 2.1, then it will decline. Each cohort of parents fails to have enough children to replace themselves when they pass.
You ever be a halfling style?
Way. Okay, where does this one actually go? It was here.
It goes in the circle hole.
Of course, within a certain country, this rise or fall can be either exacerbated or alleviated by migration, as people either flock to or flee from a certain place. Nevertheless, if we look at this chart, recording shifts in the global total fertility rate from 1950 to 2023, we see that from a peak of 5.3 in 1963, that figure has been trending steadily downwards. As things stand, we're having just 2.3 children per woman, and that downward trend only needs to continue a very, very tiny amount more before the global population begins to shrink. At present, this is exactly what demographers expect is going to happen.
So, like, caring about the population remaining self-replicating, or like that the population doesn't shrink, it kind of mattered a little bit, I feel like, when we were still under the delusion that we were going to get Social Security. Once we all realized that we're not getting Social Security, regardless of how many children are had, like, it's just not sustainable. It's totally fucked because we refuse to tax wealthy people. Who gives a fuck? I don't understand how I am expected to care. I've watched more than 3 streams in a row. This 3-stream streak is fake. Sure you did. Empire needs more bodies to throw at their enemies. That's true. Yeah. You just can't make me care. I think you should just have kids if you want them and don't have them if you don't want them. And I really don't care if the population grows or shrinks.
The United Nations currently predicts that the global population will peak sometime in the mid-2080s, at which point declining fertility rates will launch us into a new era of increasingly rapid population decline. And while Paul Ehrlich might be popping open the champagne, the pronatalists are concerned that a situation of what they call the population collapse might simply present us with a whole new set of challenges. Let me show you another video.
Why is it in Japan many people have no children? why the population is going down, why women having so few children. Are you worried about there being so few children in Japan now?
This is a clip from Birth Gap, a film by campaigner Stephen J. Shaw, who, like the Collins...
You ever just like walk up to random people and be like, are you concerned? No babies? Are you concerned? Are you concerned? Ma'am, sir. So... In English, yeah.
Has made raising the alarm about falling fertility rates his personal mission. He's seen here doing some spontaneous street interviews in Japan, which has long been viewed by pronatalists as one of the canaries in the population collapse coal mine. Like many wealthy countries, Japan experienced a significant baby boom in the wake of the Second World War. But where the baby booms in the US, the UK, Canada and much of Europe lasted for around 2 decades, Japan subsided after just 2 or 3 years. After which, the country's total fertility rate began to fall precipitously. As we can see from this chart, in 1947, Japanese women were having, on average, 4.5 children each over the course of their lives. But by the mid-1950s, that figure was already tickling the replacement rate of 2.1. In the early 70s, Japan's fertility rate finally plunged into the sub-2 zone, and ever since the 1990s has fluctuated between 1 and 1.5 children per woman. Improvements in public health and the associated increase in life expectancy mean it took a little bit longer for the country's total living population to begin to decline. It kept climbing, if more slowly, until 2010. Then it began to happen. Every year for the past decade and a half, Japan has had fewer people living in it each December than it had the previous January.
It's a very difficult issue and there is no easy fix for this issue.
Countries like Japan and South Korea often take the headlines when it comes to discussions of falling populations. We hear stories about young people refraining from sex, extreme work cultures which leave no time for family life, and closing schools. As that declining global fertility figure shows, however, a similar trend has taken hold across much of the world. The University of Oxford's Our World in Data site recently compiled this map, which distinguishes between countries which are currently above replacement fertility levels and those which are currently below. As you can see, it's a pretty even split. According to the International Monetary Fund, around 2/3 of the world's population now live in countries which are presently on track to begin shrinking. It's very likely...
Isn't fertility the ability to have a baby? Birth rate is the amount of actual births. Why are they being used interchangeably? I don't fucking know, dude.
That the country that you are currently sat in whilst watching this video has already fallen below that crucial 2.1 figure. As of 2023, the US, the UK, Australia, France, Ireland, Brazil and Colombia all had fertility rates of just 1.6. The Netherlands, Sweden, Norway, Germany and Belgium are at 1.4. Canada are at 1.3. South Korea might be leading the way at a measly 0.8, but other countries are not far behind.
You look at Korea right now, and 60% of Korean citizens are over the age of 40. So it's likely already too late.
Denims, Google how many children were born in Japan this year versus how many people died. I just did, and that's crazy. There were 1.5 million deaths in Japan, and there were 700,000 children born. For a frame of reference, the United States, 3 million deaths, 3.5 million children born. "16 months sub," you said I'm not in everyday.
16 months sub, and you said I'm not an everyday Caquicot caught.
Yeah, it's almost like people don't want to have children when they have to spend all of their time slaving away at their fucking job. People in a capitalist society that wants to put you in crippling debt don't want to have kids to add to their expenses and debt. What? That's crazy. What? You're lying.
For them to turn this problem around. So
wait, guys, if the population drops enough in the United States, do you think there's a chance we'll be able to buy homes? But guys, here's how Bernie can still win. Here's how Bernie can still win, okay? But you can provide such a great example for your potential children when you die by overworking. With no children, your death is wasted. That's true. As somebody who has children, I don't love the world I've brought my kids into, and I'm worried how they will fare. Yeah. The fact that all this data is not correlated to the effects of the cost of living is ridiculous because I bet it plays a significant part. 100%. 1,000,000%. Like, the thing is, people, you as a human being, I'm sorry to say, you came with like you came hardwired to want certain things. One of them is having children. Now, that doesn't mean that every single person that's ever been born has wanted to have children, obviously. But the chance that you, as a human being, exist today within the framework of evolution, there is a good chance that you have a internal biological imperative or desire to want to have kids. Like, you're kind of hardwired to probably already want that. You're more likely to want that than not want that. Yes,
of course you have a breeding kink. It came free with your fucking being alive.
Yes, yes. I love that tweet so much. Thank you. So you don't even have to try that hard to make people want to have kids, because they kind of already want to have kids. You just have to provide an environment that allows people to be able to have children. Disagree. Anecdotal, but I feel zero desire to have children. And I don't think I'm alone in that. Okay. How have you been around for over a year? Wait a minute. First chat message, you get 1 pass. Okay, chatter? First of all, if you've watched any of this stream ever, you should know I don't want kids, and I've never wanted kids, and I never will want kids. I decided I didn't want kids when I was like 15. I was like, actually, that sounds terrible. Actually, I don't want children. Actually, I'm good. And my opinion has not changed at all. Okay, my statement was about being a human being. You are more likely to want to have kids than not want to have kids, which is what I said. Like, within would you adopt? Yes. If I was well off enough, I would adopt. Because I would feel like a moral imperative. But like, if the conditions were, here's a question for everyone in here, actually. If society was good, all right, and you made enough money to live very comfortably, to go on multiple vacations, to not ever have to worry about medical bills, to enjoy yourself, a little coffee, maybe even, dare I say, some avocado toast, that you could afford a house, that your kids would be able to go to college for free. This is a load-bearing if, okay? All right? That financially you were totally good. You had no reason to believe that you wouldn't be good. That you have a big enough savings account that you don't have to be concerned about emergencies. Okay, all of these things. Let's say that all of these things are true. How many people in here would want kids, and how many people wouldn't? Ones and twos in chat. Ones if you would want to have kids, twos if you wouldn't want to. And you can retire at 60. I'm pretty sure there's at least like 10 to 20% more ones in chat. Again, because you're like, we're just animals. And there are natural things that come free with being an animal. Okay? And that's kind of one of them. You kind of want to do that. Obviously culture plays a big part of it and blah, blah, blah. But I went with my partner to a consult for that. Doc says she might still want to have kids and looks over at me. I say it's her choice. I support her. He was a lot more open to it after that. Blech. And those doctors make me sick. I have always been a firm too. I've always been a firm like, no, I'm good on kids. I don't want kids. I don't want. I don't want. No, I'm good. I'm good on that one. Mm-mm. But I think for a lot of people, if they worked 4 days a week and they were never stressed out by their job and they had sick paid leave and they had maternity leave and paternity leave and they had health care and they were able to buy a house and they knew that they could put their kids through college easily and they were able to go on vacations and they got vacation time, actual vacation time, and they would be able to retire. I think a lot of people would have kids. I think a lot more people would have kids because I think that there is something that's fulfilling for a lot of people. I truly don't understand why we can't all work part-time at this point. Don't even get me started. I like how we have 1 million studies showing that people are more efficient when they work from home. And we have 1 million studies showing that people work just as much, if not more, on a 4-day work week, but we still have to work these fucking dog shit 5-day work weeks and show up to work. It's just so stupid. It's so dumb, dude. Wait, do you mean if we were treated and valued as human beings? No, I don't mean to become a communist or anything, but... But oh god, dude, it takes a lot to make people not want to have regular unprotected sex, but oligarchs found a way. Yeah. Anyways, back to the video. There's like something in my eye.
Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when...
Sorry.
Need to turn this around before we hit that level, but the truth is we probably won't.
The difference between a total fertility rate of 2.1 and 1.4 or 1.5 might not seem all that much, but over the course of just 2 generations, that's the difference between a population maintaining its current size and shrinking by 35 or 45%. Even with the buttresses of increasing life expectancy and inward migration, Japan's population is on track to decline by nearly a quarter over the next 40 years. Where wealthier countries such as the United States are set to avoid absolute reductions in population for a while longer, it will largely be a result of immigration making up for that deficit in births. But why does any of this matter? If population increase was such a concern until just a few years ago, then surely a declining population is a good thing. Are the pronatalists simply trying to fearmonger about nothing? Well, not exactly.
I'm so excited for the reveal. Show me what's in the stroller.
Potential challenges associated
You want to show me?
with Paul Ehrlich's population bomb scenario were fairly easy to get our head around. We all know that we live on a finite planet with finite resources. And while we could certainly distribute those resources much more equitably, it's clear that there would eventually come a point where there simply wouldn't be enough food or water or energy to go around. The challenges associated with a declining population are a little bit more nuanced. For some pronatalists, the fear is one rooted in outright racism. They look at this map of countries with above and below replacement level fertility and worry that, to put it bluntly, African countries are quote-unquote outbreeding European and North American ones. Hungary's far-right Prime Minister Viktor Orban has openly built his policy agenda around fighting such a scenario.
We're living in times when fewer and fewer children are being born throughout Europe. People in the West are responding to this with immigration. They say that the shortfall should be made up by immigrants. What we need is not figures, but Hungarian children. In our mind, immigration means surrender.
Others on the right fear that, regardless of what happened within their borders, shrinking national populations will lead to decreased military, economic, and cultural strength on the world stage. But even if we bracket off some of this more extreme stuff for a moment, and even if you believe, quite plausibly, that the declining impact on the environment which will come with a smaller global population would be a good thing, then there's still some very real practical challenges which come with a country or the whole world's population declining too rapidly. At the heart of this issue is the simple fact that a population which is shrinking due to low fertility rates doesn't shrink proportionally to its current makeup. Instead, as people have fewer and fewer children, there's an increasing proportion of older people to younger ones. We can see this fairly plainly in this chart, which tracks the median age of people in Europe and North America from 1950 to the present day. Since the end of the post-war baby boom, the median age of both regions has increased by about 12 years. The crucial figure to keep our eye on, however, is what's called the old age dependency ratio. This tracks the percentage of a given population at a given time which is over the age of 65. And it's referred to as the dependency ratio because as they retire or become unable to work, old people become increasingly dependent on younger people to keep things ticking over. This is sometimes true in a very direct sense. They might need carers or healthcare workers to look after them. Even if they're healthy, they need shop workers and delivery drivers and warehouse staff to furnish them with goods and services. Older people continue to use electricity, water, and roads which need maintenance and improvement. And on a broader level, for older people to receive either state or private pensions, they need younger people to be paying taxes and keeping the stock market buoyant enough that there's something to pay them. In a country which is either at or above replacement level fertility, this isn't too much of an issue. Every time a bunch of older people retire, either the same or a greater number of younger people join the workforce to replace them. They can provide all that direct support whilst also ensuring the economy continues to grow. Furthermore, in a growing population, the ratio of older people to younger people actually decreases over time. During the baby boom years of the 1960s and 1970s, for example, over 65s accounted for less than 15% of the population of both Europe and North America. As fertility rates have dropped, however, that figure has more than doubled. Europe is likely to hit an old age dependency ratio of 1/3 in just the next few years, and North America isn't far behind. As we'll see shortly, a lot of the most enthusiastic torchbearers of the pronatalism movement are driven by some pretty ugly motives. Racism, classism, and a desire to bemoan the increased agency that contemporary society affords to women.
We've seen an increasing stratification among men, where some men at the top get an increasing amount of mating opportunities, and then while men at the bottom
mating opportunities, love that,
are being excluded from mating.
But before we dig into any of that, it's important to again stress that there are real challenges here. State pension systems across the world are already facing crisis as old age dependency ratios shift higher and higher. Healthcare systems are being stretched, and older voters are electing older and older politicians. And yet, just because the core problem is real, doesn't mean that some of the explanations for why we're having less kids, which have been adopted by the pronatalists, are entirely legit. In fact, some are pretty suspect indeed. So I guess it's about time we talked about this thing. If you look at this chart, tracking the changing total fertility rate in the United States and United Kingdom from 1950 to today, you'll see that things really began to take a turn during the 1960s, which makes a lot of sense. In 1960, the US Food and Drug Administration approved the first oral contraceptive pill. Just 4 years later, a quarter of all American couples were using it. Its rapid popularity saw the various legal restrictions on who it could be prescribed to gradually overturned, and its efficacy and ease of use ensured it was quickly embraced by women and couples wanting to gain greater control over if
I have to pee really badly, but I'm going to be listening.
And when they conceived. All of this makes it kind of easy to infer that the decline in fertility rates is a direct result of contraception simply getting much better and more widely available. In fact, some pronatalists have flirted with trying to shed doubt on the efficacy and safety of the pill.
I'm not saying that people shouldn't use birth control. I think we shouldn't use, I think hormonal birth control is making a lot of women sad and depressed. Yes. And they don't realize it, and they don't realize that's the cause.
Nevertheless, this is a niche view. Even those commentators most willing to bemoan expansions in women's agency will accept that safer and more reliable contraception has been a means through which people have changed the number of children they had, rather than the reason that they've done so.
It seems obvious that, one of the causes, the distal causes, I would say clearly, is the promotion of the birth control pill, but even that is a somewhat shallow answer because there's a very specific set of social and economic realities, zeitgeist, that even made the invention and distribution and acceptance of the birth control possible.
For one, many countries previously saw a drop in peacetime fertility rates during the Great Depression, when the pill hadn't even been invented yet. Further, as Stephen J. Shaw highlights in responding to Jordan Peterson there, the pill wasn't legalized in Japan until 1999, when that country's total fertility rate was already well under replacement levels. But perhaps you can see why declining fertility rates might have piqued the interest of some conservatives. Because while the exact reasons that we're having less kids are hotly contested, we do know that it has something to do with countries getting richer, and more particularly, women becoming more educated.
Unironically, like if you want to have more children and you want women to give birth more often, then like I'm pretty sure the fastest way to do that, if any of these people actually gave a fuck, is making a less misogynistic society. Like, I'm sorry, in what universe would someone want to have kids just so they can get shamed and told that their labor isn't valuable and told to shut the fuck up and have kids and stand in the kitchen and serve me? Like, it's the same thing as like the people who say like being a barista is not a career. It's like, so you don't like coffee shops then? Well, no, I want coffee shops. I just don't want to respect the people who do it. I don't want to respect the people who make the... I don't want to do that. It's like... Huh? So you want this thing, but you want to basically enslave these people who do this thing because you don't want to respect them. Okay. I just... You can't have your cake and eat it too, dude.
Let me show you another graph from Our World in Data. This bubble chart compares the total fertility rates of the world's countries with those countries' GDP per capita, which is an, albeit flawed, measure of national wealth. What we see is a pretty strong correlation between a country being richer and a country having lower fertility rates. There are several proposed reasons for this. One is that in poorer countries, children are often an economic benefit to a family. They very quickly become an extra pair of hands which can support a family business or help around the house, making life easier and boosting the parents' income. In fact, with children being so useful and infant mortality rates being relatively high in poorer countries, you might have more children than you otherwise might choose to, in case some sadly pass away. As a country gets richer, this is less and less the case. Laws might be introduced banning child labour. The government is likely to introduce compulsory education up to a certain age. Children very quickly cease to be an economic boon and become an economic burden instead. Not only can they no longer boost the family finances by working, and not only do you still have to feed them, but you might need to buy them school books and uniforms and transport them around. Just as important, however, is this graph. This graph maps national GDP per capita against the World Bank's Gender Parity Index. What it shows is a positive relationship between a country's national wealth and women and girls within that country having more equal access to education. It's worth saying that this is very much a two-way relationship. It's not only that wealthier countries tend to extend more opportunities to women, but that, surprise surprise, utilising the skills and talents of your entire population tends to be economically beneficial. This does have implications, however, for having kids. In countries where women are expected to work, there's simply less time for being pregnant, giving birth, and raising children. Given that taking the necessary time out of work to raise a kid can have a significant impact on a woman's career prospect and earning potential, children only become more of an economic burden, as couples have to weigh up the joy and fulfillment of having children with the increased security of greater earnings. And it's here that the conversation surrounding declining fertility rates becomes kind of politically contentious. Because at this level, the fact we're having less children appears to be a product of social, political, and economic changes which many of us view as deeply positive. It is a good thing that women are no longer the property of their husbands, that they can go to school and are able to pursue their desires and ambitions in the world. And there is a way of engaging in this conversation which is sensitive to that. In the hands of some of the most vocal pronatalists, however, that tends not to happen. Which I guess means that it's time to show a bunch of clips from the podcast sphere. Which is maybe scary enough.
No, don't do it! Don't do it!
Let me show you another picture. This is
Bob, thank you for the prime.
The thumbnail from an episode of British podcaster Chris Williamson's Modern Wisdom podcast. Williamson is an ex-Love Island contestant turned British Joe Rogan alike. Which I don't mean as an insult, I think he would really like that comparison. Like Rogan, his show features a range of guests, including health gurus, the very occasional celebrity, and a glut of political commentators, usually of the more contrarian variety.
Sorry, I ruined the economy by not wanting to bust open my pussy. Like, damn, stop.
Yeah, the idea that we are living through a climate catastrophe seems highly suspect to me. Highly suspect.
But also somehow very sexy.
The fertility crisis has become something of an obsession of Williamson's. He's had several pronatalist campaigners and researchers on to discuss the topic, and often brings it up in other conversations too.
You'll be maybe the 5th, 6th, 7th conversation that I've had on something to do with birth rates, declining fertility, and I'm going to keep on banging this drum.
But this thumbnail is particularly telling for the state of the conversation surrounding falling fertility rates. Because the more combative pronatalists seem to quite like being accused of being misogynists. In an era in which the importance of any given political issue is often judged less on merit than on how controversial it can be made to appear, such accusations help set them up not simply as people studying a phenomenon which has been overlooked, but as renegade modern-day Galileos who are being suppressed by the political establishment.
And so we did something that pissed off the deep state bad.
To suggest that there might indeed be a little bit of either intentional or completely accidental misogyny to some of these pronatalist conversations does risk playing into this victim narrative. But the reality is that almost all of the leading pronatalists steep their discussion of this topic either in tired anti-woke grievances or at least incel-adjacent views of sex and relationships. Seriously, I've watched so many of these videos over the past couple of months, it has kind of broken my brain.
If you create a society in which you don't get lauded, you're not celebrated, you're not like the cool people for getting married and or having kids, you're not going to do it because you're not an idiot.
Simone and Malcolm Collins' Basecamp podcast generally swings towards the more extreme end of this spectrum. There's a pretty stark contrast between the website of their pronatalist.org foundation, which is fairly professional and reasonable, and their YouTube channel, which looks like this.
Wow, these are some headlines.
Like
Wait, I have to read some of these. How the left took over big business. Marxists run the whole thing. China, are you okay? It's worse than you think. Zombification of black culture. Autism is not your gender. Protecting education with Jewish technology. Man. Whoa.
Whether as a result of audience capture or simply an attempt to get more clicks through sensationalism, by the time of the 2024 US presidential election, the Collins' slightly oddball response to declining fertility rates had descended into them ranting about how the Democrat Party is actively trying to keep women single in order to get more votes.
Women in society historically, they would rely on a partner to help care for them and to help care for their kids.
Oh, and now it's the state.
Yeah, and when you disintermediate the family unit, you can use the state both to decrease the BATNA of a woman to not have a partner, while also acting as the caregiver. Like, these women are sort of like nuns to the state. They're basically married to the state.
Amid this hyperbole and invective, the Collins' core argument is that
I hate it. I hate it so much.
That the drop in global fertility
Why are
rate
they in different rooms? I don't know. I don't know.
Is primarily the result of shifting cultural priorities. Some mixture of the decline of religion and the rise of feminism has, they argue, caused a shift in gender roles which is damaging relationships and by extension leading to a lack of kids.
I think part of this is progressivism has made women undateable and unmarriable, like the modern iteration of it.
Their supposedly egalitarian solution to stopping the decline in fertility rates is thus to encourage groups who already seem to be having more kids to have even more. And while they strongly refute any accusation that they have eugenicist tendencies, this does seem to amount to encouraging rich people like themselves to reproduce over others.
Denims, did you hear that? You're undateable. Oh, fuck no. What am I gonna do? The freaks don't want to date me. No, it's so over for me. No. Oh, the type of person that wants to have 10 kids doesn't like me. Oh, this sucks. I hate this so much. It's so awful. Man.
The point of why governments need to encourage pronatalism is because they need to produce more taxpayers. If governments only produce more non-tax-paying, very low-earning citizens, their infrastructure is still going to crumble. They're still going to be politically unstable. They're still going to have pension fund nightmares. What you need is high taxpayers. And so any government incentive to have kids should disproportionately incentivize those most likely to pay a ton of taxes.
This focus on cultural change runs throughout the podcastified version of the fertility rates conversation. In fact, Chris Williamson's conversation with Mads Larsen is a pretty good case in point. Larsen is a literature scholar and evolutionary psychology enthusiast whose interest lies in what he calls mating ideologies. In short, the changing ways in which societies think about sex and relationships.
It is the foundation of all social orders. We like to think that politics, philosophy, all those big subjects are what it's all about, but at the foundation, it's how men and women reproduce. And upon that,
everything else rests.
That thumbnail aside, Larson is less of a controversialist than the Collinses. Nevertheless, both he and Williamson are pretty certain that declining fertility
I hated that.
is a direct result of more and more people being single. This, it's worth saying, is a very real trend. Between 1990 and 2019, the proportion of 25 to 54-year-old Americans who are single increased from 29% to 38%. It's also increased ever so slightly more among men than women. As Larson tells it, the key factor here is a shift in our contemporary mating ideology, which has allowed women to become more choosy in who they date and have kids with.
Women have been empowered to have their own jobs, make their own money, be free, and importantly, to choose their own partners for the first time in human history. The result of that has been that the better women are doing, the more they exclude the lowest value men from their potential pool of partners.
When women can make their own money, they don't want to be with abusive pieces of shit and become baby-making machines? Dude, next you're gonna tell me freeing slaves makes them not want to work for free. You can't, that's crazy. That's insane. Whoa. Whoa, dude, whoa. Relax for a second. Calm down.
Challenge, as he sees it, is that there simply aren't enough quote-unquote high-value men to go around. The women who miss out thus end up sad and alone, as do the quote-unquote low-value men.
By the way, the only real truth to low-value and high-value male is like, high-value male will like remember your birthday and is fun to be around and has a job. That's what the bar is. That's what it is. But then the problem is there are low-value males that are like, well, I have a job and I'm a huge asshole and I can't get a girlfriend. It's like, have you tried being fun to hang out with? I don't know. Just an idea here. Just a concept. Just an idea.
What's interesting about this conversation and so many others like it then is how quickly it transforms into a fairly generic manosphere debate with all of the usual concerns.
The idea that there are reasons to not want to have children. One reason is an overwhelming self-centered narcissism. That's not the only reason, but it's definitely.
Call me out.
Sorry, you're right. You're right. I've seen dudes who don't even like being around people and they're confused why women don't like them, like my guy. Yeah. Yes, I can have a job and play video games or treat women as human beings, and I think we all know which one is worth more. The number of dudes that are like, I hate all people equally. I'm a misanthrope. Anyways, why can't I get a girlfriend? It's like, dude, because you hate all people. What are you talking about? Listen, there aren't that many bad bitches to go around that also hate all people. All right? Stop being greedy. Okay? I'm sorry, dude. You got to pick a new niche. That one's too oversaturated, all right? What's her name in Jane? Jane from Breaking Bad? There's only so many Janes to go around, dude. You're being greedy and you know it. All right? You got to branch out a little bit. And consider maybe liking people. Sorry. I'm sorry. But it's analogous to the soft skill discussion you had the other day. Yeah. I want to create a mini-me that I can project all my goals in life on. That's how unnarcissistic I am. Yeah, the breeders are weird. The breeders are really weird. I don't know why it's like crazy to be like, actually, if you want to have kids, you should have them. And if you don't want them, then you shouldn't have them. I don't know why that's even remotely a controversial statement. But then there are people that are like, it sounds like you're a very selfish person for wanting kids. You're a selfish person for not wanting kids. Whoa, dude. No. That's crazy, dude. That's insane. Oh.
Definitely one reason. And people talk about, the interference with their personal freedom and their desire to pursue their career. And in that, I read something like the absolute inability to ever sacrifice your own narrow self-interest. And I do mean narrow to the what would you say, concerns and needs of other people.
As with the Collinses, these conversations often include moments of qualification in which the interviewees attest that they're big supporters of women's rights and gender equality.
It's very important for me to state that I am an enormous supporter of equality for women.
But whether they intend to or not, these conversations cling to highly misogynistic views of the world, which cloud any real explanation for why we're having less kids. Larson's frame of a shift in mating ideologies, for example, quickly naturalizes women's subservience to men. The supposed tendency for heterosexual women to seek quote-unquote higher value male partners is interpreted as some primal urge, rather than the historically contingent outcome of a world which, in the case of the US and the UK at least, didn't allow women to independently open bank accounts until the mid-1970s. On a far more fundamental level, there's also this sense that despite these claims by pronatalists that they're all for women's liberation, there is this sense that all of this is kind of women's fault. Women are portrayed as beings with agency who are denying men relationships and children, while men themselves are seen as passive victims of the fertility crisis.
How do you know that it's women's standards being too high and not the standard of men decreasing?
Because it's relative. I mean,
Sorry. I shouldn't have laughed that hard. I just think of the prime. I'm sorry.
Men are men and women are women. Going out and saying to men you have to get better. I mean, who would go out and say Somalis need to get better? Or
this gendered perspective is aided, of course, by the fact that if you trawl through the many podcasts which have been recorded about fertility rates over the past few years, there's something which feels like it's more absent.
I like how the guy asked him, how do you know it's not that women's standards are becoming too high, but it's that men's standards for themselves have stayed too low? Because women are women and men are men. I'm losing it. I'm losing my mind. I just don't know what to say.
Than it should be. Maybe not entirely, but enough that it would be ludicrous not to mention. A good 90% of them are just super lengthy conversations between two dudes. If you genuinely think that the decline in fertility rates is primarily the result of women making different choices than they used to, it just feels like a good starting point would be to, ask one. The other core problem with these conversations, however, is that it's just not that clear at all that the decline in fertility really is primarily the result of cultural concerns. In fact, despite Jordan Peterson's comments about narcissism, there is plenty of evidence to suggest that most people still do want to have children. The real question then is why they're not able to achieve that desire. Oh shit! Let me show you some polling from Gallup. This is a line graph tracking changing opinions on the ideal family size upon Americans from 1935 to the present day. What it shows is that after a steep decline during the 1970s, a preference for larger families has been broadly increasing for some decades. The same dataset shows that not wanting to have kids at all remains pretty rare, with just 8% of respondents replying that they neither have children currently nor want them in the future.
Literally everyone that I know in the real world, like everyone that I've met in real life. Okay? Because you're going to select for friends that you have on the internet, right? But everyone that I've ever met in the real world, all of the friends I've made, not with the internet, either have kids or want kids. Literally everyone. I don't have a single friend or like, what do you mean not with the internet? Well, because I have friends that I've known for like 5 years, but we're only internet friends, and obviously I'm going to select for internet friends that I can hang out with a lot who don't want kids, because then they can sit on their computers and play video games with me all day, right? So that sample size is not a good sample size because it's innately selecting a group of people that are going to be similar to me. It's not a good sample. Whereas like running around in the real world and meeting people, like the sample of meeting people in the real world, it's like literally everyone. I don't think I've met a single person who said that there is no part of them that wants kids. On the internet, I would say it's like a 50-50. Where it's like 50% of people I meet have said, I don't want kids at all, and 50% have said either they already have kids or they want kids. Like, it's very rare. I'm like one of 2 people in my entire program that doesn't have kids and doesn't want kids. Yes, it's very rare.
UK polling has similarly found that among 18 to 34-year-olds, just 13% are currently childless and determined to stay that way. All of which leaves us in a kind of odd scenario. If the vast majority of people still want to have kids, then what's stopping them? Well, we have some polling data here too, although the answers are a little muddier. When the topic of declining fertility first began gaining some mainstream attention a few years ago, the New York Times commissioned a poll asking Americans aged between 20 and 45 who currently had or expected to have fewer children than they would ideally like, why they expected to fall short of their goal. The top 5 on that list? Childcare is too expensive. Want more time for the children I have. Worried about the economy. Can't afford more children. And waited because of financial instability. In short, time and money. And this polling was carried out before the pandemic and rampant inflation inspired a new wave.
People don't want to have kids because it's expensive. I'm losing my... This is too far. This is too far. This is more woke propaganda. Don't believe a word you guys say.
Of economic
or this guy
anxiety.
says. Don't believe
Noting
it.
the particular drop-off in births among millennials, the Washington Post's Andrew Van Dam wrote in 2023 that just about every source we consulted pointed to the broader economic climate. Hammered by the Great Recession, soaring student debt, precarious gig employment, skyrocketing home prices, and the COVID-19 crisis, millennials probably faced more economic headwinds in their childbearing years than any other generation. The Guardian was even blunter in an article earlier this year, leading with the headline, "It's money." Yet, other polls complicate this simple explanation. The Pew Research Center recently asked a bunch of questions to the relatively small subset of Americans who neither have children now nor think they will in the future. Of those who actively want kids, but who are simply pessimistic about their chances, direct economic concerns sit alongside worries about clashes with their careers and broader fears about the state of the world and the environment. In fact, the more one digs into this topic, the more one gets the sense that declining fertility rates is kind of an everything problem. The historian Adam Tooze has argued that the period we're living through is the age of the polycrisis. A scenario in which repeated financial crises have combined with war, environmental breakdown, pandemics, political instability, housing shortages, and wage stagnation to create a widespread sense that the world is just generally screwed. That this might have an impact on birth rates is unsurprising. Some aspects of this polycrisis, such as rising house prices and rents, actively make it much harder to be able to afford to have children. Others, such as the climate crisis and geopolitical uncertainty, make it harder to justify making the decision to have children in spite of those financial challenges, and to simply try to make it work anyhow. All of which makes it doubly fascinating that conservative commentators are leaning so heavily into this issue. Because fixing the fertility crisis doesn't appear to be something that is fixable through targeted interventions. Even simply paying people to have kids doesn't seem to do the trick. The level of cash handout required to counterbalance the rising cost of housing, energy, and food, let alone actually clothing and feeding a child, would be ludicrous. Reversing the trends in fertility rates then kind of involves trying to at least make some progress on all of that other stuff. Yet many of the most vocal pronatalists are at least fellow travellers with those who seek to either deny or exacerbate these problems.
It's not the money, it's not the money, it's not the money, it's the culture.
There's a sense that the popularity of pronatalism among conservatives is rooted precisely in this contradiction. To argue that we need to do something about declining fertility rates from a conservative perspective, you have to argue that so-called population collapse is a greater threat than the climate crisis, inequality, nuclear war, misogyny, populism, and so many other issues. And while for many of us that might seem like an inconvenience, to many conservatives and their hangers-on, it's an opportunity. It gives them a reason to play down all that other stuff.
Think about how much public attention has been galvanized towards climate change, worthy cause, something that people probably should be concerned about not trying to destroy the ecosystem, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen in 75 years. There are more pressing concerns.
This newfound focus on declining fertility means they can represent themselves not merely as anti-feminists or climate denialists or defenders of billionaires, tax avoiders and cheats, but as crusaders for a far more important cause. The real problem, however, is that none of these figures actually have any realistic solutions to this great threat that they're supposedly so impassioned by. The Collinses want more babies born to the super rich. Matt Larson suggested we explore the benefits of polygamy. Elon Musk is currently salivating at the prospect of slashing the size of the US state, despite his own pet issue clearly requiring greater support for both parents and older people.
There's so much government waste that's going on that I would call it a target-rich environment. It's hard in every direction. There's this just mad waste.
When I first started researching this video, that wouldn't have bothered me all that much. I wasn't entirely convinced that population decline was anything more than a right-wing fantasy. But while the global population evidently can't continue to rise forever, and now almost certainly won't, I have become pretty convinced that the speed at which
Elon Musk himself is government waste. Yes, correct.
It is currently set to decline does present us with some real and significant challenges. It will require us to rethink our aversion to taxation and spending, our openness to migration, our obsession with economic growth as an indicator of human progress, and much more besides. Easing the transition to a world of downward population trends will also likely be helped by providing support to those who do want children to ensure mothers and parents aren't unjustly held back in their careers or placed in financial hardship. The loudest voices in pronatalism today simply aren't able to have those conversations. Doing so would run counter to their other political priorities and, quite frankly, stop them from being able to use the issue as a source of panic and distraction. It is, however, going to be a topic that we're all going to be hearing a lot more about over the coming years, and which we should all give a lot more thought to.
That was a good video. That was a very good video. Common Tom Nicholas W. Yeah. I'm glad we all learned something we didn't know before, though. That people don't want to have kids because it's expensive. No, wait. I think we knew that already.